Hey y'all, welcome back to Rewired for Love. We're on this new series where we're decoding patterns and behaviors and helping to really understand where they come from and what they look like. Let's just jump right in. So, do you remember a time where you said yes when you really want to say no? Where you typed the text, you deleted it, you rewrote it, and then reread it 3 times because you didn't want it to sound rude? Or do you remember the time when someone asked where you wanted to eat and you immediately said, I don't care, whatever you want? Or the time where you can tell someone was upset before they even told you? Or that other time where someone's energy changed immediately around you and you started wondering what you did? So today, we're decoding a behavior that most people misunderstand, and that's people pleasing. I wanted to dive into people pleasing because we have reduced people pleasing to just wanting everyone to like us. But what if being liked isn't actually the goal? What if the real goal is staying safe in relationship? So let's rewind a story. Say that we are at dinner with some friends, a fancy dinner, maybe a dinner that you didn't necessarily choose, but you wanted everyone else to feel good in the space, and so you allowed everyone else to choose, even though the restaurant that was suggested is one that you do not like. So you immediately tell people, that's fine with me. And then something else comes up. You're ordering, you're trying to have a good time, and your order comes out wrong. And your friend says, send it back. But your response is, no, it's okay, I'll just eat it. So you're starting to eat, not really enjoying yourself, but you want everyone else to feel good. And then all of a sudden, you guys are laughing and joking and trying to have a good time. And someone makes a joke that hurts your feelings. Everyone laughs. And then later, because you didn't laugh, someone asks you, are you okay? And you say, I'm good. But later on the drive home, you start replaying everything. You replay the joke, their response, your response, everyone's facial expressions, whether you talked too much, whether you seemed weird, whether somebody was upset with you. I want you to think about this. Do you notice how much work you had to put in just to make sure everyone else was comfortable? And no one asked you to. This is the moment everyone misses. Because people pleasing isn't always obvious. Sometimes it looks like saying yes when you really mean no. Or maybe you're automatically agreeing with someone even though you don't really agree with them. Or maybe it looks like you apologizing excessively. Or changing your opinion depending on who's in the room with you because you don't want to feel different. Or maybe it's you avoiding asking for what you need, over explaining your decisions, especially at dinner, why you didn't want to send the food back. And sometimes it looks like you taking responsibility for other people's emotions. You're wanting to hold on to someone being upset, even though it had nothing to do with you. Sometimes it looks like feeling guilty after setting a boundary, or constantly reading people's facial expressions, their tones, their energy, to figure out where you land with them at that moment. And sometimes it's you trying to fix tension immediately in spaces. Again, even if they have nothing to do with you. Sometimes struggling to tolerate someone being disappointed with you also is people pleasing. And sometimes becoming easygoing because having preference feels too risky for you. So here's some huge distinctions that I really want you to understand, because oftentimes when I hear others talk about people pleasing, they always say, I'm just being nice. But I want to say there's a difference between being nice and being kind. Being kind is, I care about how you feel. People pleasing or being nice is, I need you to feel okay so that I can feel okay. I just need you to sit with that. If that is something that you say to yourself often or say to others often, which one are you? Are you being kind or are you being nice? And here's the thing. That's why telling someone who's a people pleaser to just say no doesn't address the whole problem. Because sometimes saying no isn't difficult because they don't know the word. Sometimes it's difficult because their body has learned that saying no has consequences, and the consequences are too heavy to bear with that person, especially if it has a consequence of potentially losing that person or that connection. So when we are trying to decode the people-pleasing behavior, oftentimes people only focus on the behavior. And a lot of times, many don't say anything. Why? Because they benefit from the person being nice. There is something that they gain from the person being nice. So most people don't want to address that or don't feel the need to because they benefit from it. But from a different lens, if we're trying to really understand where people pleasing comes from, one thing that I always ask is, so what is this behavior protecting? Because when we have strategies, when we have parts of ourselves that have learned things from our past, it's usually protecting something. And most of the time it's either protecting my emotions, because I never want to feel that again, whatever that was, or that experience, because again, I never want my body to feel that again. So there are possible relational learnings that come with people pleasing. Because where does it come from? What is it trying to protect us from? If we're talking about a disagreement and how risky that can feel to someone who is a people pleaser, maybe before, disagreement once meant yelling. Maybe it meant someone withdrawing. Maybe it meant that you got the silent treatment or punishment, rejection. Maybe it meant that you were being called disrespectful or being labeled as difficult or too sensitive. Or maybe it meant that the person that you experienced was emotionally unpredictable. And the biggest one, especially if we're talking about our inner child, is loss of attachment and connection. And if we're talking about love, maybe love felt the strongest when you were helpful, because you had learned early on that if you were able to take things off someone's plate, that they screamed less, that they cared for you more, that you didn't get in trouble. Maybe love felt strongest when you were successful. Were you a top performer in school? Did you get good grades? Did you show that you can not embarrass your family? Or love felt strongest when you were agreeable, when you didn't go against the grain, when you showed that you can have someone's back even if they were wrong. Or maybe love felt the strongest when you were quiet, because all the world around you was chaotic. There was so much going on, so much yelling, other people getting in trouble. But you felt the safest when you were quiet, when you sat in the corner, when you played quietly in your room. Or maybe love felt the strongest when you were the responsible one. You cared for yourself, you depended on yourself, you learned not to be a burden on other people, even if you were a burden. Or maybe you learned that love was the strongest when you were emotionally easy, where you didn't show emotion, where you kept yourself together, where you only expressed yourself by yourself, or not at all. And you expressed yourself in a way that was socially acceptable within your family dynamic. Because when we're talking about kids and their understanding of people, the world, a child doesn't necessarily think my caregiver has difficulty regulating their emotions. Kids are what we call egocentric, which means they're only focused on themselves, what they do if something happens, how people perceive them when things happen. What does it mean about them when things happen? So the child learns, I need to keep them happy. Or if they're okay, I'm okay. If you're upset, something bad might happen. Or if I disappoint you, I can lose connection. And eventually, the other person's comfort is more important than your authenticity. And what that means is you might become overly attuned to other people's emotions because you learned early on that your connection and your attachment can be lost if other people are not comfortable. So naturally, you have learned to be hyper attuned and be hyper aware of other people's emotional state to feel safe enough within your relationships. And you start to overanalyze different behaviors and experiences because you're trying to stay on top of that connection and never lose it. So then you start watching, did my voice change? Did I stop texting the same way? Was the period at the end of the text because they're mad at me? You may be asking someone, well, why did you sigh? Are you okay? But when we're talking about people pleasing can look like being extremely focused on other people, while underneath it, it may actually be an attempt to regulate your own sense of safety. Because again, the core belief is if they're okay, then I'm okay. But there becomes a time when your protection, people pleasing, starts costing you. It starts to feel unhealthy because as a child, it served a purpose. It kept you safe, it kept you connected, it kept you feeling grounded in comfort. But people pleasing may have helped you maintain relationships in the past. The strategy you learned from childhood, we can acknowledge that it worked. It kept you safe, it kept you connected, and it kept a sense of safety. People pleasing may have worked to help you maintain relationships again in the past. It may have helped you to avoid conflict. It may have helped you to become incredibly perceptive. It may have helped you to survive emotionally complicated environments. But protective strategies can eventually become expensive. You don't know what you actually want. Or maybe you attract people who are comfortable receiving without reciprocating. People believe you're okay because you keep telling them that you're okay. But in reality, you feel unseen, while simultaneously hiding the parts of yourself that you want people to see. That's the painful paradox of people pleasing. You can spend your whole life trying to make sure that people don't reject you, while never giving them an opportunity to actually know you. You know everything about other people. You're such a great friend. The people in your life feel so seen and so loved by you. But also, you feel so unseen and invisible by them. So who are you when nobody needs anything? When someone asks what you want, do you know? When someone is disappointed in you, what happens inside your body? Can someone misunderstand you without you immediately trying to explain yourself? Can someone be irritated with you without you rushing to fix it? Can you say no without writing a paragraph to explain why? Can somebody have an emotion and you allow it to belong to them? So I guess the deeper question for you is, who are you when nobody needs anything from you? And if you stopped managing everybody else's experiences of you, what part of you might finally be in the room to show up? So one way I want you to address your people-pleasing behavior is I want you to practice disappointing people. So look, I know, that sounded a little harsh, and I know your nervous system did not like that. But hear me out. What if you were to say, look how good I'm doing at boundaries? So instead, practice noticing that moment. So this week, when someone asks you for something, don't immediately answer. Pause. Because I want you to recognize how good you are at holding boundaries, how good you are at potentially, internally, disappointing people. When you don't respond immediately, again, pause and notice what's happening internally. And then I want you to ask yourself, what would I choose if I weren't responsible for managing this person's reaction? Maybe the answer is still yes, and that's okay. The goal isn't saying no. The goal is making sure that your yes actually belongs to you and not to them. So one phrase that you might use to just practice is, let me think about that and get back to you. No immediate yes, No automatic no, just enough space to hear yourself and to understand your capacity in that moment with what's being asked of you. So as we bring this all around, I want you to know that your behavior makes sense. Maybe you spent years calling yourself a people pleaser. Maybe other people have praised you for being easygoing, for being selfless, for being helpful, or just being the person that everybody can depend on. And some of those things may genuinely be part of who you are. But I want you to start getting curious about the moments when kindness stops being a choice and starts becoming protection. Because there's a difference. There's a difference between I want to help you and I need to help you so that you still be okay with me. There's also a difference between I care about your feelings and your feelings determine whether I feel safe or not. Your people pleasing wasn't random. It made sense somewhere. But the version of you that learned to protect connection by abandoning yourself doesn't have to run every relationship forever. And let's just be frank, it doesn't feel good to you. So this week, don't ask yourself, how do I stop people pleasing? Ask yourself, what am I afraid will happen if I don't? And that's where the real story begins. And remember, your behavior isn't random, it's adaptive. And when you understand what it's protecting, healing becomes possible. It doesn't feel like it's unbearable. And I'll see you next time on Rewired for Love. Until then, keep rewiring with compassion.